Hi there, this is Matt Heffernan. Welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, by all means, please subscribe and you'll see what we have to offer here. And what we're doing right now is a series on the XCI game engine, which stands for Extremely Compact Interpreter. And this is an adventure game engine for the Commander X16 retrocomputer, which is currently in development right now. And this engine is sort of inspired by graphical adventure game engines of sort of the late 80s, early 90s, like SCI and Scum, if you're familiar with those. And if you go back and watch the beginning of this series, watch some of the demos that are on my channel, you can see some of the things that I've already started to do with this engine. And the last couple episodes, I've been talking about how you actually create animation within the game. And that's pretty much what all the levels are. They're just animation. And we've gone over the basics of animation, how you structure a level, and last time was talking about sprites and how you do the sort of sprite animation, which is what we normally think of when we think of animation. But another just as important part, especially for in sort of old-fashioned adventure game like this, is the text animation. And of course, the first generation of adventure games were all text. There was no graphics. And then sort of the second generation came along where what you had was just a still picture, a basic graphic of what's going on, and then everything was happening with an interactive sort of text console underneath that graphic. And what I've done with XCI is sort of split that down the middle with the succeeding generation, sort of like two generations past that, where we get the point and click adventure game. So I have a point and click adventure game, but all the text, rather than sort of being integrated in or having actual voiceovers, it's all down at that same sort of bottom text area. But instead of being an interactive console, it's just a print only. So the actual game developer, the game writer, is in total control of what gets printed out there. So we're going to talk about some of the instructions that you use and some of the constraints and different ways of using text in a game. So as we can see here, here's a partial screen capture of the example game that packs with XCI. There's been videos of this before if you've seen it, and that text area at the bottom, as you can see, it supports 4 lines of text, and those lines of text can be 38 columns wide. You'll notice there is a little margin right over here and over here of a single tile width. And that's just to make the text a little bit more readable, especially if you have a monitor that doesn't have a lot of overscan. And it just makes it just generally easier to look at. And that's what we have to work with, is putting text in here. So how do we do that? Well, in order to determine what and when you put animation text up in the text field, I create these simple 4 instructions. Text, which is how you render text. It's very simple. And if we go into the full documentation, which I'll peek over in here, we see these 4 instructions: text, scroll, line, and clear. Here in the main documentation, under the level files keys section, you'll get a nice text description of these different instructions and shown in context of the first couple levels of the example game. If you go over to the syntax guide, that's all this is on GitHub. The link's going to be down in the description in case this is your first video here. And of course, if you want to see the next video, please go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. I'll remind you to do that again later. Anyway, here in the syntax guide, you can see text and scroll, line, and clear are all defined right in a row here. And for text, you just have the word text, then a style, which is an integer from 0 to 3, and then a actual line that you're going to print out. And that line is going to be from 1 to 38 characters, and we'll talk more about that. And then if we go back here to the slide, very succinctly, clear just clears all the text and resets the current line to line 0. Remember, up here we have 4 lines, which are under the hood numbered 0 through 3. So 0 is up here, 3 is at the bottom. So clear makes it so that the current line that you're going to print to is line 0, and then scroll will scroll all the lines up, and then whatever your current line is going to scroll up along with it, so that if you're at the bottom at line 3, if you do a scroll of 2, because if you look here, scroll has a line count as a argument, and you can scroll up 1 to 4 lines. You can scroll basically everything up. If you did a scroll of 4, that would effectively be the same as clear. So you can do that, and then your the current line that you're printing on is with the next text instruction will go at what that line number minus what the scroll value is. And then finally line, where you actually can skip a line. So if you're at the top at line 0, you can do a line command, and then the next text will appear at line 1. Or you can have gaps in between there, writing on every other line, however you want to do it. And it's called line because it's like the print line command that you would see in C or Java or a lot of other languages. So again, if we go back here in the documentation, line and clear are both completely argumentless. They just do the key by themselves, and they do their thing. And then like scroll just has that integer value, and the text has that integer value. Now the style, as you can see, is from 0 to 3. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's where we start to get into the different constraints of the actual text. So what you're limited to in XCI is standard visible ASCII characters. And of course, standard ASCII is just a 7-bit standard, and it goes only up to 127, but number 127 is the delete control code, and the first 32 ASCII codes are also control codes. They're not printable. But number 32 is the space character. So we support from space all the way up to character code 126, which is the tilde right here. And so you get all upper and lowercase letters of the Latin alphabet, and all the numbers, and then a few special characters thrown in. So if you want to have some other kinds of characters, say if you're trying to support a non-English language where you could have more likely to have accented or decorated characters, you can go ahead and replace some of those special characters that you don't intend on using. A good example would be to replace that tilde, say with an ñ if you were doing Spanish, and then if you were to write the word Spanish in Spanish is español, and you would get that ñ in there by just within your code putting a tilde, and then that tilde would be replaced with an ñ in here, and just by changing tile 126. So what would that actually look like? Well, if we go here, here's the main configuration file, and we can see here tiles. The tiles file is in tiles.hex, and I have that over here. And we've been in this file before earlier in this series, and we can see here tile 0 is transparent, and we've defined a few of these up front. And then we eventually get down to this point here around tile 26 where we haven't started defining anything yet. And notice 26 through 31 are still available, but once we hit tile 32, this is where we hit the character set part of our tile set, starting with the space. And you'll see here that the text characters, the background is always using color index 6. Well, what is it? Let's look at our palette here. Now for the template, it by default uses this default XCI palette. I'm sorry, X16 palette, and for X16 being a 16 color, XCI being a 16 color system, we don't use the a 256 color mode. We use a 16 color mode, but you can use different palette offsets. But for the text, you are stuck with the colors that are in this first palette offset that you define, those first 16 colors. So you can see here 6 is the background, which is blue, just like that same color blue that when you first boot up the X16, that's the background. And then the text by default is white. 1. And so we can see here in the next character, we have some 1s mixed into the 6s. Here, this is an exclamation point, ASCII character 33. And it just sort of goes on from there, where we can see here we have quotes. But how do we actually make these come out in the same characters? Well, the right colors, we'll take a look at that later. And then anyway, if we get down here to the bottom, and we can see here, here's the end of the ASCII characters, the tilde being the very last one, 126. And it's right here in the tiles hex file where we would change this out to be, say, an Enye character. And then we can just use that, just pop it in there. And then when we do a text command, it will just go ahead and use that Enye. But now the colors. How do we define what color the text are going to be? Now, we've seen already the menu configuration, and we've touched on that a bit before. And for the menu in this game, we have, we're just using the default template settings for all the text here, including the menu text. And if we go back here to main, we can see here the menu configuration, menu.xci. That's right over here. And the very first instructions in the menu configuration are the menu background and foreground colors. And so for the menus, we have white on black. I'm sorry, black on white. The background of white and a foreground of black. So in order to do that, what we have to do is get the color white, as we see here in the tiles, the color white into number 1, which, hey, guess what? It already is there. But then we need to get black into color 6. So how do we do that? Well, we do that through different palette offsets. So the way that we structure palettes within XCI is you define the palette, the default palette for the your game, and that's going to be those 16 colors, and your text has to come from those. And we say here for the menu background color, well, we're going to use for the background, we're going to use 1. And so then here the background color, which is normally 6, is going to turn into white, and then the foreground we want black, so 1 is going to be black instead of white. So instead of white on blue, it'll be black on white. And so we do that by modifying this palette offset right here, starting at 176, palette offset 11. Because palette offsets 1 through 10 are actually used for defining the palettes of bitmaps for the different levels in your currently loaded zone. And if you went back to the first episode in the series, we talk about the graphics and explain how all that works. Well, for the text, what we use are the next 4 palette offsets. And this one right here, starting at 176, is the menu. So when we make this change for menu, we are changing the background color. So the color index 6 of the menu palette to be the same as number 1 right here. So we're going to copy this color value down to here, and then for the foreground we're saying we want it to be black. So we're color index 0 from the top palette. So we're going to copy that black all the way to here, to 177. And so now we're going to have basically this entire palette copied over here, with the exception of 1 and 6 being changed to black and white respectively. So we are going to have both 0 and 1 be black, and white being moved to 6, and we lose this color of blue. But that's okay. All we're really going to be using this palette offset for is that menu text. And when we do a text instruction, we can actually use 0 as that for that menu style, so we can keep using that same style later on. down below in the text display, and not just for menus. And we'll see how that looks later on. Now, meanwhile, for the rest of the text, we have the three different text styles we find, and it's the same deal as the menus, where we define a background and foreground colors based on that default palette. So here for text style 1, it is going to be white on black, so that foreground color of 1 is going to be preserved, and that's going to be down in this palette offset. This is where text style 1 is going to be, text style 2, and text style 3. And in all three cases, we are making the background color black. That's 0. So we're copying this black to here, here, and here. And then the foreground colors we are putting here in the 1 slot. And for text style 1 is white, so this is going to stay white here. But then we're going to put yellow, number 7, down to here, and 14 light blue, we're going to put that down here so we can have either white, yellow, or light blue text on black, or that black on white menu text. So what does that look like? And if we go back here, we see the constraints that, I define here what the default templates are. Of course, you can change those to be whatever you want. And we'll see how that looks also. And you got to remember that only those first 16 colors can be used for text. You can't start going beyond that, those first 16 colors for anything else. And you are also forced to use that palette offset 0 for a few other things within your game, like the toolbar and the menu and the inventory control and the help screens and stuff like that. But when we talk about actual tiles and sprites and bitmaps within the game, then you have a lot more flexibility for that. So let's take a look here at the game that we've already created. Now, as you can see here, we've already put some text instructions in. For the first level, level 0 of zone 0, we said just hello world. We did a little hello world at the beginning, and in our previous video we added this ball bouncing animation, and you notice here there's a bunch of wait commands in there, and that will give us some nice timing to deal with, where we can start having text come up at different times. But for now, we're just going to leave that as is, as we will level 1. So let's go ahead and run the game as we have it right now. There's that title screen back in episode 1 we created. And we do new game, and there it is. There's hello world. That's the top of our text field, and we're just waiting for this bouncing animation to finish, because when that's done, we have the trigger over the ball to click on that and move on to the next one. And of course, I did manage to make that text go away already. So you'll notice in here there's an init sequence that prints out we're here, and if you were quick, you would have seen that already put up there. And then the first sequence, since this is the first time we're here, it says buy something, will ya? In fact, if I just go ahead and start the game over again, we'll see that happen again. So yeah, we go into hello world, we wait for the animation to finish, bouncy, 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 and then there. We're here, buy something, will ya? And then we put these other graphics up. And that's it. That's all the text that we have in there until we get to some of the triggers. So like we have the trigger for the bananas. So if we click on the bananas, it will do text 1. Bananas are 3 for $1. So of course 1 is text style 1, which is white on black. That's all the text like this that we've already seen. And if I click on the bananas, it'll just keep printing that. And you notice it doesn't do any sort of clear or line or scroll commands, so it's just printing under where our current line is. So we were on line 2, now we're set for line 3. So if we do another thing that will cause a text command, like we click on bananas again, we're going to see, again, bananas are 3 for $1 pop up on there. Now we do it one more time. We've got the whole text field all filled up. And so any new text lines that come in are going to force a scroll of a single line for every text command that comes in. So here I can just keep clicking bananas, and there we go. We can fill the whole screen with bananas are 3 for $1. And then we could alternate with the Grail, because we see here, if we click on the Grail, it'll say Grails are one easy payment of oops, $9,999. So I can click on that and I see, yep, there it is. And I can go back and forth and do all that. And then I make it go away. You notice here I bring up that toolbar, and then the toolbar disappears and it takes all that text back with it. So now if I actually go ahead and buy some stuff, you can see here that I've got the Grail, and there's another type of text that comes up. And I can keep on clicking bananas are 3 for $1 and make it go away. But that's it. It's the only way that text works that we've implemented so far. So let's make this a little more interesting, at least in that first level. So first, let's take a look at what those different text styles actually look like. So we got text style 1 in there. Let's precede that with a text style 0 saying menu, and then we'll say text 2. This is 2. And then text style 3, we'll say and 3. Maybe we'll put a space in there to be extra nice. All right, now let's go ahead and build our game and rerun it. Do our new game to see this level. And there, now you can see immediately all that text came up because there wasn't any wait commands in between there. There was no waiting for triggers or any other sort of thing to prevent all that text from getting rendered right at once. And there we can see that menu text. It looks just like the menu text. It's black on white. And then we see the reverse for text style 1 and text styles 2 and 3 being these different colors. And so then we can go ahead and play with some of these colors. If we wanted to change the menu colors, we could do that. Say we wanted to make that background something other than white. Let's say we want the background to be, like 12, it's going to be dark, kind of like in those here. I have Adam sort of in a dark mode. So we'll say here, just like this menu, it's going to be light gray on less light gray. So it'll be 15 on 12. Oh, that'll be very slick. And then say for text style 2, we want to reverse that. We want to make 7 and 0 switched. So this is not telling the truth anymore. It's no longer yellow. It's going to be black on yellow. And then for instead of light blue, we don't like light blue. Let's make that brown. Why not? Everybody loves brown, nice earthy tones here. All right. Now we go ahead and rebuild. And we will see already that difference. Now, we didn't implement a whole dark theme by just changing those couple commands there. What we would have to do is change the other tiles that we use for defining the menu. As we can see up here, all these different tiles that we call out. And if you go back to the menu video, you'll see how to do all that. But now here, I'll go ahead and do my new game. And yep, so you can see that same sort of darkish menu text. We didn't change text style 1, but then we reversed text style 2 and made text style 3 that sort of deep amber color. And there we go. So let's go ahead and, through the power of Git, we're just going to discard all these changes. There we go. We'll get back to where we were. Now let's say instead of hello world being at the top, we want to put it at the bottom. So we're going to have to add a few line commands. down in there. So we do 3 line commands. Make sure we have each line on a separate line. There's no argument again for line, so you just have to do line the number of times that you need to have lines skipped. This is not a horribly sophisticated language, but that's okay. It's nice and simple and should hopefully be easy for you to understand. Without much in the way of experience, it should not be too difficult. That's the whole philosophy I had for designing this. And now we can see there it is, hello worlds at the bottom. And of course it goes away with the inventory control, but that's fine. So now what do we do? Well, let's say that we want at these different points to sort of scroll up. So after these longer waits, while we're waiting for the ball to go across the screen, we'll say that here after this first time we want to go up a line. So we're going to move that hello world up 1 line, and then we'll have rather than skipping a line after hello world, we'll be ready to write something right underneath hello world by doing a scroll 1. And then we'll, after this wait 132, we'll go ahead and do another text that says bouncing. Oops. So there we go. So let's see, what does that actually look like? You can see here we're back to the original text color, and there we saw that first bounce, it pushed it up, and then that second bounce, it actually wrote bouncing. So let's do that a couple more times. All right. So now after the next big thing, we're going to say, all right, we like that bouncing, but now we're going to do a scroll of 2. So that then, after the next big wait, we'll be able to do another text that says bounced again. So now we would expect this one, since we did a scroll of 2, that we're going to be writing bounced again rather than at the bottom at line 2. And we'll still have line 3 empty and ready to write with the next text, which we'll do right here, where we are now going towards the floor and we've started rolling. And so we'll just say here, text 1. Oh, I need to make sure I put in my different text style numbers in here. Bounced again, and we'll say rolling. And that should then get rendered at the bottom. So let's go ahead and watch that animation one more time. And here we see there, bounces up, fills it in. It's going to bounce it up 2 lines. There we go. Then we're going to fill in that 3rd line. There we go. And then we're filling in the bottom. And that's it. I mean, that's a pretty basic way of using some of these. Now say that we want to incorporate clear, because a lot of the times you want to just clear things out and you want to have something that is reflective of the moment. So let's go ahead and, again, the power of Git, we will discard these changes. We'll go back to the beginning, and then now let's say each time we do a little bounce, we see these little 12-frame waits here for when we do the bounce. Let's say right before that, we are going to do, we're not going to say hello world at the beginning anymore. Or, you know what? We will. We'll still say hello world. But right before the bounce, we're going to, you know what? Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Right before the bounce, what we're going to do is do a text of 1, style 1, and say bounce. And then when that wait 12 is done, we're going to do a clear. And then that bounce will go away. And so let's take a look at what happens when we do that for each time. each time we're doing this wait 12, we're going to say bounce and then wait that 12 and clear it. And so we'll just momentarily see the word bounce as if we were doing sound effects. Well, we're going to do sound effects in a later video. But for now, we're going to be doing this. So each of these bounce. And let's take a look at that. What does that look like? Oop, don't want that yet. We'll go ahead, build it, and run it. Now we see here, bounce, 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 bounce. Oh, and then we're rolling, and we've come to a stop. So let's actually go ahead and narrate that too. So now we can see that when we come to the end of this last diagonal move down there, we want to go ahead. We've already got the text screen cleared. So we're going to say here, text 1 rolling. And then we want to say when it stopped. Well, it doesn't stop until after this init sequence is done because we end it with a sprite move. So we've got another 15 jiffies until after this move is finished executing. So let's go ahead and add a new wait of 15 jiffies to wait for this. Again, it's doing 5 frames with 3 jiffies in between each frame. So 15 jiffies later, we will actually see the ball come to a stop. And then we will print out text 1. Whoops. Stopped. And in fact, we could even do a clear before that, so that now we won't see rolling anymore. It'll clear that out, and it will just say stopped, and we'll be done. So let's go ahead and build that and see what that looks like. And here we go. Bounce, 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 rolling, stopped. And there we go. And that's it. That's some very basic text animation. There's really not a whole lot more to it than that. That pretty much showed you everything that you can really do with text, but you can get pretty creative. As you can see there, I'm giving you the basic tools to do some of this stuff with. And that's what I hope you do, that you go down to GitHub, that link in the description, and give XCI a try. Give the X16 emulator a try for right now until the actual hardware comes out. And go ahead and try playing the example game that's packed in there. I have a tic-tac-toe game that I've created that's also there on GitHub if you look for it. And I hope that you spend this time where we're all kind of stuck inside. We don't have a lot to do other than maybe some working from home type thing, and then we got to figure out what to do the rest of our day at home. Well, instead of just sitting there watching TV, you could actually spend this time productively and build something to look back on, so that when we think about this time, what did we do with our lives? What did we do with all this copious free time? Well, instead of just, I just caught up on some TV show. Now I went and I learned something new, and then I created something, and I have that to show for at the end of the day. And that, I think, is a really great way to take advantage of this very trying time. So I hope you're all staying home and staying safe and staying healthy, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.